big design up front. It's a dirty word, it's a dirty term, right? Design's a dirty word. It's been tied to waterfall like a bad rash. You will have to design everything up front, the whole system, define absolutely everything. You'll have to do this, and we can't know what we're designing for. How can we predict the future? Business changes. Business is supposed to be agile. How on earth are we going to design everything up front? You know, and like maybe we should refactor in small little steps and get there. You know, maybe we'll fine tune things, right? Designing up front is really wrong. You know, this is the prevailing wind. The problem is that design is like a knee-jerk reaction, like going away from that. So design is like, you know, it's so dirty, we don't use that. We don't use it in iterations. We sort of shy away from it. And this sort of like designing, going to the outskirts has actually been quite damaging. So, okay, so I've written down some of the issues, and I'm just going to look at, you know, two of them, right? So I'm going to look at design, I'm going to look at over-engineering. Okay, so design in general. So number one, it doesn't have to be up front. It could be within. It could be just in time, right? It doesn't have to be big. It could be small, right? It could be little things, right? It could be just the right things, right? Maybe the architecture, the things that are difficult to change within the system, would you want to design that properly, right? Make sure that you don't run into problems halfway through. That's part of being agile. Right, is designing something so well that it can move around, right? Moving around is not just the act of being a developer and going, I'm agile, I can code this and now I can code that, and you know, we only work in an iteration of 1 week, so I can swap, you know, to something like this and swap to something like that. That's not what agile is. Agile, a large part of it will be the design, right? If the architecture doesn't fit where you want to go, you got big problems. Right? So design shouldn't be a dirty word, but it is. And you know, if you're designing a garden, you don't just, you know, hop onto your favorite nursery e-commerce website and order a bunch of random things and somehow it'll arrive in some date, and you go out there and you plonk everything down in different places. Right? You don't place things wherever. You don't willy-nilly do that. No, you go out and you go into your yard and you go and have a look, and you get a piece of paper and you see where the shade is and where the path might be, and you have a look. You see, you feel it, right? You try and understand what would be livable, what would be good, what you want to look at. When you look in that direction, I would like a tree, I want some flowers. Oh, I can't put it there because there's too much shade, right? So you obviously wouldn't just emergently design that backyard. You'd want some kind of design. It doesn't have to be everything. But then again, you go to the nursery, you bring back a shrub that caught your eye, you plant it somewhere and it dies because it's not in the right area, right? So big design, number one, doesn't have to be big. Doesn't have to be up front. But boy, do you need it for some things. Boy, do you need it for architectural type things. Things that are part of the core. So you do need design. You just need a good place for it, right? You need to integrate it into your systems in a good way. And of course you need a good designer. Let's look at over-engineering, right? So things like UML, design, architecture, it's like all in the realm of that beardy hat wearing, old fart wearing sandals, right? So yeah, this can happen. People can over-engineer. Right? And you could spend a lot of time on something, more than you should have. And yes, it could be a waste of money. But the thing is, you know, it can be combated. Well, how do you combat it? Well, make sure it's needed. Make sure you design with constraints. Make sure you design something that's needed, and the proportional amount of time that you spend designing proportionally on the amount of time it takes to develop. Right? I mean, ensure the implementation is going to happen within your budget, right? These are constraints that a designer works with. Now, if you can't do that, well, then you're not a designer. A designer has a set of constraints and works within the constraints. That's what it's about. And, you know, over-engineering, if you do have somebody that's over-engineering, replace them. It's almost as simple as that. Right? Doesn't have to be over-engineered. Somebody doesn't have to sit down and do UML of everything, right? So this leads us to, one of the thoughts, like if it's not big design up front, well, then it must be something else, right? Like emergent design. Okay, so emergent design is it's not valuable, right? It's only valuable when the design presents itself at some strange scenario that you didn't foresee. Something happened, something changed, and then the business had to go here and there, and there's this design emerging, right? We're improving it all the time. Well, that I put to you is an edge case that happens occasionally. That shouldn't be the thing you design. It shouldn't be the way you design. It should be the way that you operate. You don't operate on edge cases as the norm. You operate on the norm and have edge cases. Emergent design is it doesn't have any value. So if it doesn't have any value, why do you use it? Why would you even consider emerging a design? Well, emergent design might have some heuristics and good principles that you can encounter when you hit that edge case. Fantastic, right? So emergent design inherently has no value. A subset of that, I just want to bring up, like the entire design, like big design up front, does it really have to be the entire design? And if you think that big design up front is tied to design and architecture and beardy old men and all that kind of stuff, antiquated ideas, well, if you think of all that, well, then you've misunderstood big design up front then. Because I thought big design up front is designing absolutely every angle before you write a stitch of code. But then if that was true, why is it that people aren't doing any design at all? Right? So yeah, if you go and download your favorite thing, right, whatever it might be, right, the Docker or whatever tool, right, I bet that's been designed, right? You don't come across these things by accident, right? People look into it, they research it, they have constraints, they have a function, they have functionality they want to reach, and they design something for it. Right, I'll be very surprised if somebody comes back and says, Windows was an emergent design. Yes, it has been designed and refactored and moved and worked, but let me tell you, there is a design there, right? There is a design. And the same is true in anything that has real value. And remember, in different industries, a certain level of design is not going to go amiss. If I'm building a flight control system or a navigation system or controlling airplanes, am I not going to want to design that a bit? Well, of course I am. So number one, let's get rid of the idea that big design up front is this negative thing. It's the connotations around it that people just place around it and sort of group it all together and group old-fashioned engineering and UML and all these things all in the same basket. It's not. And yes, it's true that guys were using UML and using bad tools and overusing tools. So do we today. We're using Kubernetes and Docker for things we don't even need, right? I mean, it's true then, it's true today. Just like you have a business vision, you should have an architectural vision. And I think the team should know where they're going. And there has to be elements of design within that. And I think it's always understanding constraints and then delivering constraints to subsystems. That's a very, very important part. Because if all your developers are working in opposite directions, you're not going to get that familiarity and you're not going to get that consistency. So it's very, very important. Lastly, I'll leave you with this. I've written it down so I don't get it wrong. A good designer will understand the constraints and will never design to the detriment of the business. And if he designs for the sake of design, hire someone else.